Hi, welcome to Sonder Sisterhood. I'm Carrie. This is a YouTube channel for the single and the childless, not by choice person. Today, we're going to focus a little bit more on the single side of the channel today. And I'm going to talk about how to manage really stressful times when you live alone. There's a lot of really hard stuff happening in the world right now. And I think we all know what those things are. The media, social media, conversations with friends, even just kind of general interactions out in public, the coffee shop, the grocery store, all of these things can feel tense and heavy. We're all collectively feeling it. It can feel agitating, irritating, an us against them type of mindset around it, not knowing who this person is, what they believe, how they're going to respond. And ultimately, things can just feel hopeless. When we think about the greater sort of, like, is the world going to hell in a handbasket is kind of the thought. And a lot of these things that it can feel like you have no control over, but all of these things are spinning around you. And it can feel like we have to actively manage how much we're exposing ourselves to this. I know that that's something that I'm actively trying to do, is really think about and consider how much am I exposing myself? Because once I start to sort of go down the rabbit trail a little bit, or the algorithm hooks me in, it feeds it to you on this endless loop. And so if you're not being intentional around it, before you know it, an hour has gone by and you've just consumed a lot of really heavy stuff. And a lot of that heavy stuff is traumatic to look at. The videos, recordings, it puts us in a place where it can feel like we're there, even though we're not, because we're not just hearing about it. And there's not a bunch of different filters. We're getting like the scene. So you could be scrolling your phone, watching TV, watching YouTube, or just talking with somebody, and then all of a sudden you're pulled into this conversation or into somebody else's really intense feelings around it without meaning to. Because a lot of this is like sitting on the surface for many of us with not a lot of places to take it. And yes, it's important to be informed. It matters to be able to understand, or at least have maybe awareness is a better phrase, is to have an awareness of what is happening to people. Whether it's you, your friends or family, or people far away who are part of the greater human community, and that same human community as you. And it's also important to care for yourself. And it's okay to set boundaries around how much you're absorbing and how much you're interacting with, particularly when we're talking about traumatic situations. Setting a boundary around how much traumatic stuff you're consuming doesn't mean you're not doing anything. It doesn't mean you're putting your head in the sand around stuff. I also want to acknowledge that some people don't have the ability to set these boundaries, because there are things you can't set boundaries around. Like if you're in a war zone, you don't get to set the boundary around it. It's happening to you. Thankfully, I'm not in that situation. And so I say all of this knowing that depending on how you're impacted, absolutely determines how much you can separate yourself or turn it on and off in terms of how much you're experiencing it and consuming it. I'm talking about the things that you can give yourself some space with, and recognizing that not everybody has that ability. So for those of us who are in a situation where we can set some of those boundaries, and especially those of us who want to be advocates and want to be allies, it's essential to take care of yourself so then you can show up to do those things. This is where the old oxygen mask analogy always sort of rises to the surface. You put your own oxygen mask on first, so then you have the ability to show up for others. Again, you put your own oxygen mask on first, not because you're selfish, but because if you're passed out, you can't help anybody. EMTs don't rush into danger without checking and ensuring the scene is secure. If they get hurt, they can't help others. The same principle applies here. We have to be thoughtful in how we care about ourselves so then we can be there and show up for others. So when you live alone, when you're solo, it's going to be especially hard because there's nobody there to say, hey, why don't you take a break from that? You get off work and then suddenly you're 3 hours into doom scrolling all these traumatic events and content without even realizing it. And maybe you're doing it because you're looking for connection, or you're processing alone something that might be easier to process with somebody else, but there's nobody there. There's also fewer distractions when you live alone. Fewer things that will pull you out of your head, and so sometimes you can get stuck in it. But here's some things that I have found helpful. Essentially, here are the things that I've been doing in order to balance being informed with taking care of myself. Because if I'm not careful, I can spend way too much time absorbing this content. And it'll start with just kind of one little thing that'll pique my interest. And then lo and behold, the algorithm will start feeding me more of those things that kind of piqued my interest. And now I'm consuming a bunch of stuff that is very emotionally heavy that I can't control. It leads to hopelessness, anxiety, low mood. It can impact our sleep, like all of the things. So here are some practical tips. One is have a plan for the evening. Don't leave space for the path of least resistance to show up. Meaning, I'm just gonna check my phone and now I'm just lying here and now I'm just gonna continue on this treadmill because I don't have anything else to do. So there's nothing sort of pushing me to end. And sometimes zoning out feels good in the moment. And then you like put it down and you're like, oh my God, like it all starts flooding, right? So for me, what I try and do is I try and sign up for an exercise class. I have a time that I like to walk my dog around the neighborhood. Now, fortunately for me, my dog is very much attuned with when that time is. So he makes sure that we do that. And sometimes I do both. The next thing that I would suggest is limit passive media consumption. I try not to scroll the explore page on Instagram, meaning like when I pull Instagram up and down at the bottom, there's that little like, I don't know, magnifying glass that maybe I think it is. I don't click on that anymore. It's like the portal into hell, it seems like for me. So I'm avoiding clickbait and I'm avoiding emotionally charged like headlines or things on the news. So instead, I try and check one or two reputable websites or reputable news sources. I usually just peek at that like once in the morning, once in the afternoon. I try not to do it late at night because I find that that's like when I'm lying in bed and doing that, that's when I tend to like an hour has passed now and I'm absorbing traumatic events, right? Because I'm in bed, I don't have anywhere to be, I'm just waiting to fall asleep. My dog is snuggly next to me. So now I don't do that. I also really try and avoid deep diving unless there's something that I really need to know, because the really big events will get to you. I also try and focus on facts or like news versus pundits, opinion pieces, things like that. Like that stuff. Yeah. This also could be a really good time to re-engage with some hobbies. You know, this stuff, consuming, doom scrolling, it takes up a lot of time. And maybe there's some things that you'd like to do instead, and you would find the time if you stop doing those things, right? For me, that means reading, working on this channel, coming up with content stuff. This is some things that has really been a good source where I can put some energy around. For others, it might be cooking, baking, knitting, crocheting, painting, drawing, swimming, biking, dancing, trying a new recipe or a new creative project. Maybe it's photography. What is something you've been wanting to try? Maybe now is a really good time to try it. Essentially, we're talking about intentionally making space for these things that are going to add something into your life versus take something from you, that will help you build emotional resiliency versus depleting it. 4, I'm always going to say this one, but journaling, talking to a therapist, having an intentional space to process this stuff. Sometimes we need a space to do that privately without judgment, without reaction. Journaling can also help us slow down, to name what we're feeling, to put it in its rightful spot, sort of in our brain. And a therapist can help it like take shape, can help us conceptualize it, understand it, and then talk about ways of coping. The next one is use some grounding tools, particularly if you need something in the moment, because you've just like listened to some really hard stuff or seen some really hard images. When you feel really overwhelmed, A grounding technique can bring you back into the present. So here are some ideas. Some mantras, right? Maybe a mantra is, this moment is hard, but I am safe right now, and I don't need to carry everything at once. It's okay to set boundaries. I can take a break and still care. For some sensory grounding ideas, maybe you smell something like mint, peppermint, lavender, these things that have kind of a strong smell to them, cinnamon, vanilla, those are really popular ones. Maybe you touch something that has a lot of texture to it, so it can pull your brain from these thoughts out here into what you're touching. There's the old 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, which is using the 5 senses. 5 things that you see, 4 things that you feel, 3 things that you smell, 2 things that you hear, and 1 thing that you can taste, or you can jumble those around a little bit. We're in times where that's hard to do, but that can help in a pinch, right? I also want you to consider some self-talk reminders that are really important. And maybe some of those are, I can't fix everything, I can still care. I deserve to rest, even if others are struggling. And I am not alone, even if I live alone. So living alone doesn't mean facing everything alone, even though it can feel like that sometimes. It just means you might need to be more intentional about how you support yourself or how you process really hard things. You're allowed to protect your energy. You're allowed to protect your peace. And you're allowed to also find joy even in really difficult times. And even when other people are going through some things that they don't deserve either. You can still be a caring, informed person, even if you need a break. We're not meant to hold all of this stuff. It's not weakness. Like, we're not built to have a constant flow of traumatic information come at us all of the time. So those are some of the suggestions that I have. Let me know what you're doing to help yourself, or suggestions what you might have for others in the comments below, because this is a community where we're here to support each other. Follow Sandra's Sisterhood for more videos for the single and the childless, not by choice person.